Let's talk some puck. Who do we have on the pod today, Laura?
All right, you're not going to find anyone more knowledgeable about hockey. We have
True.
Arthur Staple. He covered the NHL for both Newsday and The Athletic for 20 years. He was the NHL editor at The Athletic. Now he's doing his own thing, which I think is very, very cool. He hosts two great podcasts, Hockey Night in New York and the Tri-State Hockey Pod. And let's talk a little puck with Art. All right, today on the podcast, we have Arthur Staple. He has covered the NHL for 20 years for both Newsday and The Athletic. He is currently the co-host of Hockey Night in New York and the co-host of Tri-State Hockey Pod with Daily Faceoff. And he's also written a book, 100 Things. Was it 100 Things Islanders fans should know and do before they die, or was it 1,000?
I think it was 100. It felt like 1,000 when I was working on it, but I managed to make it to 100.
100 things. Before we get into NHL playoffs, I noticed that you had Lou Lamoriello on your podcast recently. How's Lou doing?
He's great. He is a one of a kind human being, and fans can feel however they want to feel, especially Islander fans, about the job he did as GM. But you don't want to like pat yourself on the back to say like, oh, I know the real Lou, but just being around him, talking about his grandkids, he's got a steel trap memory for all the things that he's done. I encountered him plenty in his heyday when he was winning Stanley Cups running the Devils. And now that he's in his 80s, he's a little bit softer. He's a little bit more willing to chat about his career and different things. And so I feel pretty lucky to have kind of caught him at that time. And now that he's pretty much out, I think he's still a consultant or an advisor for the Islanders ownership, but the game never leaves him. And the only thing he was frustrated with us on Sunday night is that we were keeping him from watching playoff hockey. So that's how he stays sharp. And it's incredible to hear some of the stories that he's got.
I mean, speaking of playoff hockey, it is the best time of year for hockey fans. I mean, for all fans, even somebody who's bored and ensconced in baseball, there's absolutely nothing like playoff hockey. Just looking at the slate right now, which of these matchups intrigues you the most?
Dallas and Minnesota, there's always outcry, especially online, about there's always one matchup every year where one division has, three of the top 10 regular season teams. So you're guaranteed to have at least two of them be out by the time we get to the semifinals.
Yeah.
It's usually the Atlantic Division where the Leafs are, so the cries are always the loudest because the Toronto media and hockey is obviously the biggest and most willing to scream and yell about the rules. But this year it's the Central. Colorado kind of lapped the field, and then Dallas and Minnesota really have kept up their end of the bargain. Many obviously making the Quinn Hughes trade, and their GM Billy Guerin was the GM for the U.S. Olympic team that won gold, and Dallas kind of felt like they've been a team that's not quite of destiny, but really getting close. They've been to the conference final, I think, 3 years in a row. A lot of these last few years, not able to get over the hump. So that was kind of the series that everybody's watching. The Wild blew the doors off Dallas in Dallas in game one. Dallas came back last night and won game two. So I think that one's going to go for a while. And the other one in the East that I really liked beforehand was Tampa and Montreal. It's kind of, you see one team, the Lightning,
Yeah.
obviously won the back-to-back cups back in the pandemic era, made the third final, and they've got some guys that are very familiar names. Nikita Kucherov, Andrei Vasilevsky, kind of, guys that have been at the top of the heap in the league for a long time. And Montreal is a team, maybe there's no other team that's more fun to watch than the Canadiens with all their young talent. Cole Caulfield, 51-goal scorer this year. Uri Slavkovsky, who was a number one pick a few years ago, gets a hat trick in game one, including the OT winner. They play fast. They play fun. Sometimes, Marty St. Louis, I don't know how gray his hair was before he took that job as coach, but it's pretty fully gray now. So I imagine they make coaches a little bit nervous, but it makes for exciting hockey to watch. And I think as we've seen, if you're someone who watches all these playoff series, kind of caution and defense, not giving up a lot seems to be the name of the game, and how teams like Philly get ahead in their series in Pittsburgh. Vegas plays that way too. So when you see a team like Montreal that's ready to run and gun, willing to give up some chances to get some chances, that's a team you want to watch. So that's a fun series for me too.
I feel like the Mammoth are also kind of that's sort of a little bit more of a run and gun team, but they're kind of coming up against a hacksaw right now. What do you think of that series?
I think with Utah, not that they give off the vibe of just happy to have made it, but the
Yeah.
fact that they're in year 2 in Salt Lake City, kind of fully flushed all of the bad memories of the Coyotes for all those years of kind of disappointment, changes in ownership, all the weird stuff that happened there. So they have some stability. Ryan Smith, the owner there, also owns the Jazz, is a guy who's got lots of money and is very open and honest about what he wants to accomplish there. They've got a good young team, but they're definitely feeling like, and certainly they had the lead, and Vegas has had a very up and down season. Obviously, they brought in John Tortorella 3 weeks before the end of the year to coach them. So Utah does have a chance there. I just think that there's so much inexperience around their lineup, and Vegas obviously is a team that's been there year after year, even though they're one of the younger teams in the league in terms of just how old the franchise is. So they've got a lot of guys who know how to ramp it up this time of year. I don't know if Utah has that. So of the teams that are kind of new to the playoffs, I would guess the Mammoth might not be a team that you'd pick to get to the next round. But if they do, they play in that buzzsaw of a Central Division, but they're the ones that kind of, because of the wild card, have crossed over to play the Pacific Division winner, Vegas, who I think had one more point than Utah during the regular season. So if you're going to advance, that's a division you want to be in, because a lot of those teams were pretty similarly flawed during the regular season.
Yeah.
You mentioned the John Tortorella coaching change. What is the mentality behind? Because the Islanders did it too. Reloading a coach with, I don't know, only a handful of games left.
Well, Laura mentioned Lou Lamoriello off the top. He was the pioneer in that. He did it back in the 99-2000 season, bringing Larry Robinson in, I think, with 4 games left, and the Devils won the Stanley Cup. So if there's anything to emulate where you want to say like, hey, maybe we could do that, that's probably the reasoning for it. And I feel like those two teams, kind of different reasons for doing what they did. Vegas was probably going to make the playoffs. They were bobbing along. They looked like they could fall out, but that Pacific Division is really weak this year. So they were probably knew that they were good enough to get in, but maybe not good enough to advance. And Bruce Cassidy, who won a Stanley Cup with them 3 years ago, and has obviously had them playing at a high level. Like a lot of good coaches, the message can get stale pretty quick in this league. So I think that was by George McPhee, their president, Kelly McCrimmon, their GM, backed by Bill Foley, who's one of the most aggressive owners in the league. You make that change because you need to light a spark under them. I don't know that they think that Vegas is good enough to get past a Colorado or a Dallas or a Minnesota in the conference final, but you got to at least give it a shot. And the fact that they brought John Tortorella in from the ESPN studio desk, guy who we all know what he brings. He's a lot more bark than bite I've experienced in my 20 plus years of knowing him, but he does command a lot of attention and a lot of respect, and makes people kind of sit up a little bit straighter in the meetings. So if that's what you feel like you need right now, he didn't even sign a contract beyond the end of the season. He doesn't even know if he wants to continue on. I imagine he does, but it's pretty hilarious that you just kind of say like, yeah, he's got, whatever, 8 games left in the regular season, however far we go in the playoffs, and then we'll figure it out. It sounds a little seat of your pants, but I think the aggressiveness for a group in Vegas that's been together a long time and has won before, sometimes you get a little complacent. So I feel like that was the reason for Vegas doing that. The Islanders, to me, a bit of a different animal. They did it with 4 games left to fire Patrick Roy and bring in Pete DeBoer. That's really just jumping the line to the end of, getting to the end of the regular season and not wanting to wait in line with a bunch of other teams that might get rid of their coach or have already gotten rid of their coach. Peter DeBoer is probably the guy that was going to have the most job options once the season ended and maybe the first round ended and teams were sorting out where they want to be. And the Islanders GM Matthew Darche, backed by their ownership, bit the bullet. Patrick Roy had 2 years left on his deal at around $2.5–3 million per. Pete DeBoer, I think, is the 3rd highest paid coach now in the league. He got 3 years beyond this year, and my understanding it's around $5.5 million per. It's a lot of money to spend on coaches, one of whom is no longer working for you. And that's the kind of commitment we haven't seen out of the Islanders really that much over the decades. Even in their heyday, they were a pretty spendthrift franchise. So it's good to see, if you're an Islander fan, they're willing to spend on areas where you're not capped, like coaching, like development. And I'm interested to see what Matthew Darche, he's got a big offseason to come because the team collapsed so hard at the end of the season, but he's got the coach that he wants going forward. I'm sure Peter DeBoer will have a lot of input on what their personnel decisions are this summer. And I'm interested to see what Matthew Darsh does with his front office. He's only made a couple of changes, and he's not even really a full year onto the job yet. So it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Islanders for sure. They've got a core that's been there a long time. The last 5 years have been pretty disappointing. So could be some real serious changes afoot there. And when you've got the best available coach to run the ship, that's worth a few wins in the standings, and that might make the difference for them.
Yeah, and also entering the Matthew Schaefer era, or we are in the Matthew Schaefer era, which is certainly kind of like taking the hearts and minds of Long Islanders who have absolutely nothing to hold on to right now.
Yeah. It was a magical ride there for about 80 to 90% of it. It was incredible to see. I was up at the scouting combine after the Islanders had the first overall pick up in Buffalo last June. And just sitting down to talk to Matthew Schaefer, who wasn't even 18 years old then, and having a 17-year-old, I've got a 20-year-old, and he's not, no shade to my son, but if you can carry yourself as a teenager the way that Matthew Schaefer does, just leaving aside the hockey part, his family should be proud. He should be proud. He's an incredible young man to talk to, personable, represents a lot of special causes that are close to his heart. Spent a lot of time before the draft, meeting with kids who have lost parents as he did. It's just remarkable to talk to him. And then on top of it, to have this player who exudes such joy being on the ice. It's really unprecedented. And it, you saw what it did, not just for Islander fans to be excited about a player who comes in without much expectation, even though he's the number one pick. And this year at age 18 to do what he's done. But to see the way that it spread throughout the room, a room of, like we said, a lot of 30-somethings, a lot of guys with kids, a lot of guys who have not had a lot of success, but had a lot of consistency with this group. It really changed a lot about this Islanders team, and I think it changed the approach of ownership and of Matthew Darsh. They went out and added some veteran pieces throughout the season. They were really riding high on Schaefer, on Ilya Sorokin, on a couple other guys, but they felt like they needed to reward this group for what they'd done, and it obviously didn't end well, but there's still a lot of promise. It's not, we're not looking at a situation going into the offseason saying, where is this team headed? It's Matthew Schaefer's team. Now he's got an elite future Hall of Fame coach running the bench. They have a good goalie. They still have some good pieces there. They do have a lot of contracts that have some term left, so it is going to be a challenge for Matthew Darsh, but there's always going to be hope when you've got a young guy as talented and as special as Matthew Schaefer.
I guess in form of a segue, talking about good goalie, the Oilers finally have one. Do you think that this could be the year? And in terms of that, how much of that do you think will influence where Connor McDavid goes?
It's interesting to me to watch them play, and I think they're gonna at least make the conference finals again. When you've got a guy like McDavid and some other, you don't want to dismiss guys like Leon Draisaitl, but when you've got a guy like McDavid who plays at such a high level, but also can raise it to an even another level, that usually makes the difference in these playoff series. Connor Ingram has been a nice story for them. He kind of ducked out of the league a couple of years ago to go through the mental health and substance abuse program, and when you see guys like that come out the other side, getting rid of some of their mental health challenges or being able to manage them to have a successful career, it's a nice story, and you want to see that happen. Being the Oilers goalie in the situation that they've been in the last few years is not a low stress situation for sure.
Why?
No, you're going to face a lot of high danger shots and probably give up a lot of goals, and you're going to rely on the best player in the world to be the guy that gets you the extra one. Kind of he wasn't involved in the scoring last night in Game 1 against Anaheim, but that's essentially what they did. They looked great for a period, they looked horrible for a period, and then they were able to pull it out. So it's always going to be a heart-stopping event in the playoffs for the Oilers, and we'll see where they go with it. But it is interesting to me, and I feel like they've cycled through a couple GMs now. They cycled through several coaches. They currently have Chris Knobloch, who was McDavid's junior coach in the OHL, who's been there the last couple of years. And I kind of wondered if they lose in the first or second round, whether their GM Stan Bowman decides it's time to go out and get one of these available elite coaches. We're kind of in this era of, you look at the list of the top 20 coaches in terms of wins and games coached, half of them at the very least are coaching right now or available. You've got a guy like Peter Laviolette. You've got Bruce Cassidy, late of Vegas. You've got Dean Evison. There's guys out there that can command a room and maybe give you those extra 2 or 3 wins in a playoff series or 5 or 6 wins in a regular season to make your situation a little bit better. So I'm interested to see what they do if they go out before the conference final. Like you said, Laura, a lot of it is going to be, what does Connor McDavid want to do? I think we could be hitting kind of a detonating moment in the NHL, because you've got Toronto with Austin Matthews.
Yeah.
Does he want to stay for whatever mess they've got going on there? And it sure is a mess, and it got messy fast. So are we headed towards an offseason in a couple of years, or a trade deadline in a couple of years, where Connor McDavid is asking out of Edmonton and Austin Matthews is asking out of Toronto? I think Canada might explode. So
just trade 1-for-1. Just one for
exactly. I'm sure the Leafs fans would love that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine Austin Matthews wants anything more to do with Canada, especially deeper into Western Canada. But yeah, it'll be interesting. And I think
the sliding door moment.
There's certainly teams like the Rangers, LA, the natural US based team destinations that people think of when a big star might become available. And I'm sure that both of those teams would be thinking, we can afford and we'd make space for Connor McDavid. Anybody would. But I'm not so sure. He seems like the kind of guy that
he's going to end up in Buffalo.
Pretty determined to win one up there at the very least. So we'll see where these next couple seasons go before he's got to make a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I crack a joke, but Buffalo has been an exciting team down the stretch. And obviously that game the other night, there is nothing like playoff hockey. 7 minutes to go. I mean, it's said a lot, but it's just so true. Like the hair on my neck is standing up just talking about it. I mean, Boston's cruising to a victory. Buffalo can't seem to get any offensive, sustain any offensive pressure on them. And then with 7 minutes left, 3 goals, the barn was rocking. Playoff hockey rules. I don't have a question. I'm just like saying something that
I mean, that's
if you don't watch it, you should. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Every shift counts. It all matters.
Yeah, it's 15 years of pent up emotions. People were kind of chirping the Sabres fans for booing the Sabres power play earlier in that game. I'm like, what are you going to do? This is all they've got. It's probably the most loyal American US based fan base in the league. I got a couple of friends and relatives up there who are Sabres fans, and season ticket holders over the years, and they've just like every year is just such a one more cut to the body, one more feeling of disappointment. And I think, I don't know that I can ever think of in any of the 4 sports where a GM has been fired midseason, and that is the thing that turns the team around. A guy who has a few layers between him and the locker room. But I think it was kind of a reminder to a team that's it's a good group of talented, mostly young guys, that maybe the ownership was serious. Terry Pegula hired Kevin Adams as GM. Kevin Adams was running this junior Sabres program at the time, and went straight into the GM box. And I think a lot of people around there were like, what are we doing here? Are we a real team? This is a team with a pretty serious pedigree from the 90s and even back to the 70s and 80s. And I think they felt like it was a little bit more of a plaything for a billionaire owner rather than something that is kind of a public trust almost up there, because they don't have every major sport up there. So, I think the move was long overdue. Kevin Adams obviously assembled some decent talent. Kind of liken it a little bit to Garth Snow being the Islanders GM, kind of out of his playing days. Charles Wang took over and people were mocking it. But I think a lot of the Islanders' foundation for some of their success under Lou Lamoriello was built because Garth Snow was a pretty shrewd guy in terms of drafting and developing. Sabres have a good team, and that's partly because of Kevin Adams, but they needed something to kind of wake the room up and say, look, you're a good team. The owner takes you seriously, installs Jarmo Kekalainen, a guy with a decent track record as GM in Columbus and has been in the league a long time as an executive. I think other than, usually you see changing a coach or trading a major player or acquiring a big player is the thing to get a room going. But yeah, firing a GM was the magic pill. Who knew? For the Sabres. And my favorite part of that whole night was all the fans outside, in the channel side area, rattling those security gates. They knocked them over, and then they all were like, wait, let's pick them back up. We are not savages here. So it's a good way to start the playoffs because you got to pace yourselves. But yeah, the atmosphere was awesome.
It was
I,
incredible. It was incredible. Does Boston bounce back tonight? And if not, do they lose the series?
I mean, I kind of felt like that was a bit of a mismatch. The only way for me that Boston was winning that series was if Jeremy Swayman was going to steal it, and it certainly looked like he was going to steal that game up until those last 8 minutes. I just don't know. I'm not a huge believer in momentum from game to game until it gets late in a series. But if they go up 2-0 going back to Boston, it'd be hard for me to see. The East was pretty even from 1 to 8 in terms of point totals, but I feel like there was a gap there in those top three teams in the Atlantic, the Sabres, Tampa, and Montreal from the bottom half between Boston, Ottawa, and that group. I just thought Boston really Swayman probably going to a decent chance to win the Vezina this year as the top goalie. He's been really good for them, and you look at their lineup, and when you think about the Bruins, at least in the last 20 years, you think about Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara, these long-standing guys who helped snap their Stanley Cup drought 15 years ago, and were kind of perennially first, second, third round teams for a long, long time. And now you really look at them, you say, outside of Charlie McAvoy, outside of David Pastrnak, they're not really built that way anymore. They're kind of an up and comer still, and I like what they've done this year. I thought they'd be more down at the bottom of the standings, but I think they're building something good. I just don't think they're there yet. So I think Buffalo has more talent, and if they can kind of, it's not even the Bruins have guys that have been there before. Yes, you can say that about Pastrnak, but the rest of them are pretty green, kind of the way Buffalo is. So I think if Buffalo wins tonight and they win going away, and Swayman doesn't really have that confidence that he may have had if he had stolen game one, I think it might be a quick one for the Sabres.
wow.
Good call.
So I guess I'm going to put you on the spot. Stanley Cup matchup. Who do you think it's going to be?
I picked Dallas as my preseason cup pick. I picked them to beat the Devils in the finals, which in the first month of the season looked great because the Devils had an awesome start
You're
to
like,
the year.
I'm so smart.
Predictions are usually not my strong suit, but I'm going to be consistent and stick with the Stars. I feel like this might be
Over
the year
the Devils?
Yeah. They could probably beat the Devils if they made it. I'm going to go Dallas over Montreal this year. I thought
Okay.
about picking Tampa, but I feel like Montreal, you don't always get to see, doing the podcast this year, I focused a lot on the Islanders, Rangers, and Devils, and that doesn't leave a lot of time to watch anybody else. But watching the Canadians over the last couple of weeks of the regular season and watching that first game, I think they might have the right formula, the right mix of some veteran guys and all their great youth. And Jakub Dobish, who's a pretty young goalie, but it got a little bit of playoff experience last year. I like the way he played in game one, even though it went to overtime and he gave up 3. I just think if they can get past Tampa, that the winner of that series, to me, kind of like the winner of Dallas Mini in the West, I feel like that's going to be the team that's the most battle tested at all the first round teams. So I'll go Dallas and Montreal. I'm not, we'll get another Canadian team in the final, but I'm going to pick Dallas and keep that Canada Stanley Cup drought. I think it 33 years and counting now. So
Sorry to our
I know it
friends
hurts
from the
them to
north.
hear it, but
I feel so bad. I feel like the United States has just been bullying Canada nonstop this entire year.
yeah, this would be a bad year for a Canadian team to make it and lose after what happened in the Olympics. So it'll be
maybe they'll get
interesting.
one.
But yeah, I like the Stars. Miro Heiskanen is one of my favorite guys to watch, and a guy that is not a huge household name, but to me is one of the 3 or 4 best defensemen in the league. And he's sort of slowly getting healthy. Had an injury towards the end of the regular season. Jason Robertson, who's a guy who got left off that Olympic team, is an elite scorer. And they've got a young guy named Wyatt Johnston, who was a 40-goal scorer for the first time this year. It was a game I love. So, yeah, I'm watching the Stars, and we'll see. They could. I think it's such a wide open year where you've got a team that I'm like, all right, they're my cup pick. They could lose in 6 in the first round, but they're still my cup pick.
100%.
And that's hockey. That's also the joy of hockey is the
Exactly.
favorite can get bounced, by by a scrappy team that made the playoffs and they're, built for a run.
Yeah.
Winding down last night, double overtime, Canes in Ottawa. Did they get that call right?
It's a funny, I was talking about this with a couple people this morning. And for anybody out there who's on social media and kind of following these games along, that's not super familiar with hockey rules because you're just getting in for the 2 weeks of insanity that is the first round of the playoffs. Dave Jackson, who does as a former NHL ref, who's the kind of the referee, the official consultant for ESPN. He's on Twitter a lot, talking to people, interacting, trying to explain the rules. They don't always make a ton of sense, and I think this is one of those rules that doesn't make a ton of sense, where they have the offside review, and if they rule it offside, the goal comes off the board, but any penalties committed between the time the puck entered the zone and the time the play ends with a goal, those still count. And from my understanding is the rule is in place because you don't want people taking crazy liberties, or if someone gets hurt, you want to be able to still punish someone. And my reaction to that is, have you watched an NHL playoff game lately? Like after every whistle, it's the purge. These guys are just whacking the crap out of each other, rabid punches to the face. So I understand the intent of the rule. They're trying to plan for a situation that may or may not happen. But rules, I feel like the best rules are, in fact, reactionary. That's how we got the offside challenge in the first place. And fans want to get rid of that. They want to get rid of goalie interference challenges, whatever. I'm a big fan of the offside challenge. I've watched thousands of hockey games, and I talk to people in the game who agree with me that it's the only black and white thing that you can review. Mm-hmm. You're either onside or you're off. That's it. And last night was a little bit open to interpretation because Jordan Staal entered the zone skates first, which you can do as long as you're possessing the puck. They determined, the linesman with the help of the Toronto Situation Room determined that he possessed it, but he didn't have control, and those are two different things. And again, I can imagine some non-crazy hockey fans' eyes glazing over at that explanation. But think about if you go in puck first and you're kind of side to side with your stick, and you don't actually have your stick on the puck, it's in front of you. You're in control of it. But if you're backing in, which is already kind of bending the rules because technically your skates are ahead of the puck, which you're not allowed to do to go into the zone. You should have your stick on the puck to demonstrate control. He kind of let it lie there, and someone came at him, and he didn't really get to it immediately once he got in the zone. So I think they got that call right. The fact that there's a penalty shot after that is insane. Awesome for everybody watching.
Yeah, it was cool.
But the rule is a little too technical for me. I feel like you can still, if somebody gets hurt in this kind of, this time void that you've got that doesn't exist anymore because they wind the clock back, you can still punish the person who injured someone without having to say like, oh no, every penalty counts, even though it happened at a time of the game that did not actually exist. So it turns into like a sci-fi novel a little.
I was going to say, we're like quantum leaping at this point.
Exactly. So it was a funny one, and one of those I'm sure that the league's GMs who meet at these GM meetings to kind of decide on whether rules should be changed. They have a competition committee. I'm sure that'll be one that they didn't think that would ever come up, and now it's come up, and they can say like, all right, we got to make that switch.
Excellent.
That's fair. So my last question does pertain to the Canes again, because this group has been together for a while and they haven't been able to get over the hump. Do they blow it up in the offseason? Because I feel like the time that window has been closing.
Like
great coach, great players, but they just can't seem to.
They do what they do, and they do it really well. And Islander fans, people in the New York area can certainly, even Devil fans last year, when you face that team in the first round or even in the regular season, if you let them do what they do, which is what we've seen these two games where they have a lot of possession, they have a lot of shots, they are always moving in the offensive zone to try to create chaos, and they create these goals, and you say like, oh, that was a lucky bounce, but it's not a lucky bounce with Carolina. It's by design. They're throwing so many bodies and pucks at the net from funny angles that they're trying to get a defenseman turn this way so a puck might hit him in the back and go in the net. It's sort of design chaos, and it's a great system that Rod Brind'Amour has, and that's why he's had so much regular season success there and limited success as long as they're playing the Islanders or the Devils in the first round. They seem to always get to what they need to get to, and they've done that in these first two games with Ottawa, who I thought would give them a real series. Where they run into trouble as they get deeper in the playoffs is when you face a team where a goalie is playing exceptionally well, or they've started to figure out how to defend in their own zone, that kind of chaos stuff. And really the biggest thing for me is their own defending breaks down and their goaltending breaks down. We've seen it. If you're a Ranger fan, Rangers are kryptonite for Carolina in the playoffs. Florida is kryptonite for them. Because I don't know that Carolina has the horses in net to win 4 rounds. Freddie Anderson has looked great these last 2 games, but you know if you think back over these last 6 years or so that he's been there, he hasn't finished a lot of playoffs healthy. He'll come in and play a couple of games. They've had playoffs where they've played 3 different goalies. They've got Brandon Bussey, who's a great story. He's won, I think, 31 games as a kind of older rookie who's played in the AHL a long time, a Long Island guy, who's really performed well behind that team. And you sort of say to yourself, much like with Edmonton, why haven't they fixed that? Why don't you go out and spend $6 million or $7 million or more and try to get or develop an Igor Shesterkin or an Ilya Sorokin or an Andrei Vasilevsky and make him your guy? It's kind of Tom Dundon, the owner there, and Eric Tulsky, the GM, mostly the owner, Tom Dundon, doesn't really believe in paying for goaltending. I think the data that you look at isn't able to really consistently project out what your goaltending is going to look like year after year. So I think a lot of people that are more data centric in the league tend to feel like, well, it's voodoo, it's a crapshoot, so we'll just kind of wing it and see if we can get lucky one year. Well, that means they've flipped a coin and come up, they've called heads and they've come up tails now, whatever it is, 7 years in a row of being really successful. You'd think you'd want to change before that, but I guess they're going to gamble again this year on a very mature Freddie Anderson, who's been injured a lot in the playoffs, and a young guy who hasn't been tested. So we'll see. I think maybe it's wide open enough. There's no Rangers, there's no Florida to derail them this year. So we'll see if they can get past. I'm interested to see how they handle being up in Ottawa, because that building is going to be pretty crazy. One of the only Eastern Canada teams that's in the playoffs. So I think Sens fans will definitely show up for 3 and 4 there. And yeah, I don't know that Carolina ever really blows it up. They're always interested in tweaking their lineup. They add guys. They added Keandre Miller in a big trade in the offseason from the Rangers. And I think, they're always they were in on Artemi Panarin before he ended up choosing to go to LA. I'm sure that they were inquiring at the Rangers on Vincent Trocheck, who didn't end up getting traded. So they'll be in on their changes and trying to adjust things. I don't know that blowing it up, and I certainly don't think Rod Brind'Amour is going anywhere. And they'll have more regular season success next year, I'm sure. And if they don't win or don't get to a final this year, I think that stigma will just keep kind of growing and growing. And I wonder, at some point, some of those longtime guys may say, you know what? I don't think I want to stick around for another year of disappointment.
Right.
Maybe I'll try it somewhere else.
A definition of insanity. I don't have a final question, but I did want to give a shout out to the book your wife wrote, The Snap by Elizabeth Stable. The reason I wanted to bring it up is because I consume an ungodly amount of sports themes romance book. That's not what this is. However, having consumed them, the one thing that really sticks in my craw is these people write these books but have no knowledge of sports at all. So this is pretty cool. It is a murder mystery thriller that kind of talks about women in a male-dominated field. In this point, it's an NFL team up in Syracuse, and so I just thought that was very cool, and I wanted to mention it.
I appreciate you shouting it out. I would have too. She's working on her next one right now, and I don't know if I don't think this one is set in the sports world, but she worked in sports for a long time before she left and became a lawyer, and she has plenty, like you do, Laura, like every woman in this sport, in sports and sports media, has firsthand knowledge of all the people out there that behave poorly, that are creeps, that are keeping things behind the scenes that we wish could be more out in the open. And whether it happened to her, happened to other people, they make for a good yarn. I think we all that work in sports have to kind of turn the other way a lot of times about little things that we see. And yeah, she got a lot of good reaction from people she knows in sports and people that I know in sports who are like kind of silently nodding along with some of the passage in there. I'm sure like you were too, Laura, that, yep, this stuff happens and it happens way too often. So it was good to see that. And yeah, I think she got a little exhausted of the sports world after she worked on it. So maybe I think this next one will be set somewhere else.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, Arthur, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us. This was fantastic, and it's great to see you.
You too. You too. And thanks, Cole. Appreciate it.
All right.
Absolutely. I know when I have some sports takes, the safest place I go to is Twitter because everybody's always nice there.
Yes.
Thank you for your time, Arthur. Where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Stape NHL. Like Laura said, Tri-State Hockey Podcast at Daily Faceoff, even though our three local teams are in the dumps and not in the playoffs for the first time ever, first year of our podcast. So nice work by us. And but we'll still keep going this off season, have some guests about the local teams and talk about whatever's going to happen with them. And then Hockey Night in New York, Islanders podcast with my buddy Sean Cuthbert. It's been a lot of fun talking to the Islander fans a little more directly than I used to over the years. And yeah, like you guys know, the podcast world is the new beat writing for the most part. So it's fun to be able to run my mouth for a little bit from my basement here and not spend all my hours hanging out in a hockey rink or at a baseball stadium. It's
Very
been
fair.
a pretty nice transition, I got to admit.
Very, very fair. All right, Arthur, have a good one. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks. See ya.
Thank you.